off. Hey folks, welcome to Pugscast. Tonight we're going to be talking about influences, movies, books, comics, people that influence us to start in comics and to write the kind of comics we do. I'm Ray Roche. I'm one half of Two Pugs Publishing.
And I'm Jim Lavery. I'm the other pug of Two Pugs. And I'm excited about getting into this. If anybody has watched our other episodes, thank you very much. And for all of that, like and subscribe, thank you, and all of that stuff that we have to ask for. We really, really appreciate the hits. Ray and I are finding our way through this, so we're not 100% sure, but we're enjoying it, and I think that's the most important thing. And we were thinking after the last few episodes, if you can catch up on those, where do we go next? So I'm really, really excited here because I've asked Ray a number of times about his influences. He's asked me about mine. So it's really a good opportunity now for us this evening to sit and talk about our influences. So do you want to go first?
Yeah. Well, we have a fantasy series, Witch. And it's a really enjoyable thing to do. It's not a traditional fantasy D&D kind of story, but we went for the cliffhanger endings on each one to get people used to that idea that there's chapters here. Like, I gotta come back to you next episode. But my influence for fantasy was kind of diverse. I grew up with Lord of the Rings and the Chronicles of Narnia, and then when I had moved on to more grown up stuff, fantasy kind of lost headway in books, and I got a resurgence with David Gemmell, English writer. He brought out a book called Legend about nomads who have never had much luck fighting this city because the city has a bunch of walls, and they have to climb each wall, like it's successfully difficult for them. So he took that idea and he ran with it, and he literally redefined the genre. And you see that a lot on the back of books these days. Oh, he or she redesigned the genre. And they haven't. They're telling the same old story. But he told an old story in a brand new way. He pared it down. It was simplified. It was characters you could believe in. And I thought, I could do that. And 10 years later, I still hadn't done it. But I happened on a book called Gardens of the Moon by Stephen Erickson. And that came from himself and his friend had this long role-playing game they were designing, set in this crazy world where magic and belief in gods could actualize the gods themselves to be powerful. And of course, gods can't help messing with human affairs. And it's just a wonderful fantasy series. It's so, I mean, the books are like this thick, and where he comes up with these ideas, that some gods can be incarnate and can be chained to a rock kind of thing, and they can be the old days when someone could outwit a god in Greek fairy tales, that's something similar in these books, There are clever humans who can outwit minor gods, but it's a hell of a series, They were my influence for Witch, but the look of Witch is more to do with, people do this Renaissance fair kind of thing.
Yeah.
They dress up, they cosplay. Well, I wanted all these people to kind of look like cosplayers, super sexy, big muscles, slightly impractical, and I wanted them to be recognizable as characters. And I had 5 or 6 of them at the start, and then we pared it down to 2 or 3. But when you see them from a distance, like you said in an earlier show, you see who they are in the outline, The big barbarian, the small little magic user, the vampire, and that's what I loved, and that kept me going. The idea came from a different story I'd written when I realized it had been done by somebody else. So I said, right, I want to write something to do with fantasy or Dungeons and Dragons. And I imported some of the ideas in the story and gave it a new setting. And they just, these characters, they literally do, they jump off the page, a lot of these things, they all look the same when you pick them up, Like you said, the girls have massive boobs and they wear impractical armor, and the men are wearing like 600 pounds of armor and carrying a sword 9 feet long. Um, it's all I don't know what influences that in comics, but it doesn't do it for me. I like the gritty, the down and your feet get dirty. You got to stop and feed the horses. You got to have a pee.
Yeah.
It takes you a week to get somewhere on a horse. Don't just turn a page. Oh, they were there. My influence for that are the Greek stories, though, that literally people go on a hero's journey.
Yeah.
And they use that hero's journey too much today. If they have a story where somebody literally gets a bus down the road, the next town, it's, oh, he went on the hero's journey. What did he learn? And our characters in this, they go on a journey. Each one of them goes on a physical journey, and they change and they become different people than they started with. And Hrollt at the end of the book is not Hrollt you meet at the start.
Yeah.
And he's no longer being directed and guided by something he doesn't understand.
Yeah.
He has been literally under a spell, and by the end of the book, he realizes there's a whole vista, there's a world out there he can go and explore. Go anywhere he wants. No one's telling him where to go. And Nessie finds that she should go back to where she came from. Now I'm saying this now because we're just about finished the fourth episode, so if you're going to read it and buy it, so I'm not giving away spoilers.
No spoilers.
Exactly. And by the third episode, you sort of feel like I'm not comfortable with these characters as such. I would like to live next door now, to be honest. But
Yeah.
I loved them. I can't wait to see what they're going to do next. And I was always influenced by writers who, excuse me, who could do that to a character. Who could make you think, I want to see the next movie. I want to read the next book, the next comic. And the whole thing about Witch was the cliffhanger ending to move you on to the next bit. And even when it's finished, that these characters aren't finished. They're all going to have more adventures. And I always loved books that did that. I hate things that were just tied up with a ribbon and let's go marry the princess. But yeah, that's my influence for that. For other books now, see, I always say my ideas come from somewhere back there somewhere, and I have listening in, and I hear, oh, yeah, the muse talks to me sometimes. The SSDD books we do, the police books, they started for, as I said in a different podcast, they began because I was depressed, and I wanted to write something where people were funny, they were doing a job that it's not really a nice kind of job to do, but they laughed all the time, and they looked after each other, they cared about each other, and where, as you said, Witch was about family. SSDD is about connecting with people and supporting them, and my influence for that were all those old movies, that have, especially the Tin Man and those black and white movies where you had people who were snappy dialogue, and they could say what was on their mind, and the bad guys were all, James Cagney and people like that, and Edward G. Robinson. I'm dating myself now, but so that I read a book called Serpico when I was a teenager, and it changed me completely, about how I feel about police, because I've read police stories, and although the police could be flawed, this was a book about New York cops who showed up for work to collect their payoff, and I thought, that can't be real. But when I read about it, it was a time, it was a really dark time where criminals had all the money and they pulled the strings. And I thought, that's such a depressing thing to live through. That when I was doing SSDD, I wanted to be funny. And again, my influence when I was writing that was a guy called Don Westlake. He wrote all these crime capers, but usually the same bunch of people, and they're like they survive and they help each other, but they never really get the big score, you know.
Yeah.
And but they're wisecracking and they're funny books, you know.
Yeah.
He wrote those like 3 days a week, and then 4 days a week he wrote these really hard hitting crime dramas like guy called Parker was his name. There's a whole range of Parker books out there, and he always comes across horrible people who, you know, they'd knife you for your bus fare, you know, and it's a it's a world in America where there's scam artists everywhere, and you can't trust the police, you can't trust your family, you can't put time on it. You know, all people want is that bag of money, you know.
Yeah.
And he was writing that, and he's writing this comedy series, and I was going, how'd you do that? You know, it's hard to get your head together to jump from one to the other. But
Yeah.
he was a big influence, and especially the comedy side of things. We
Because
done a lot of go on.
sorry, to say comedy is the hardest thing to write, and it is if you're doing gags, I suppose, haha gags, and that's not what you're doing, because what comes across is this black sense of humor, like just black, these some appalling things, like, and you go, what, and you've got to laugh, and that's something you'd said before. You've got to find a way. I remember hearing somebody saying, I was thinking, I like listening when I'm working out. I listen to like true crime podcasts and things like this. And this horrific thing, and the detective was talking about how he had a badge or something, he had or keys or something like this keys, and he said when he came home at night he put them in the bowl. As soon as they put it in the bowl, that's it, switched off anything. And I think that was, and you talked about that before, that detachment or something. And you've got this bleakness in SSDD, and you go like, there's a couple of things where, listen, for people watching, there's a couple of times where I was reading the script and going to write it, and it's a crime scene, there's body parts, and you go, okay, right, okay. And you've seen them on the news, you know, they've got those tents up, you know, over a crime scene, over a body, or they're collecting DNA or something. You don't know what's going on, but it must be horrific. And then there's a scene in the book where one of the forensic doctors picks up an arm and right, okay. So I'm drawing that, and I'm sort of reading as I'm drawing, and like, and then I do a double take and went, oh my god, what's he got? What is this? You know, and sometimes like you don't know if you didn't. Like, we were having an email back and forth about different things, so I kind of got a sense of you. And I have to say, whenever can I say the second, was it the first issue I did? Oh, and it was, you know, the page I'm talking about, where Kat and Mags turned up to the scene of the body parts, right? And I and there's a part, and I went, okay, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. So yeah, but it's like the way they handle it, the two officers who turn up to this horror scene, and they're not fazed by it, like this is nothing. So yeah, sorry, I derailed you a little bit there. Yeah, it's that jump between bleak, black, like about as black as it gets, and then you find some humor in it somewhere, not laughing, pointing, haha, or making fun
exactly.
Not that, but you've got to find a thing, and that comes through really, really well. I wanted to ask you, sorry, right, I really derailed things, but I just wanted to like put a comma in, because I was thinking about all of the things you said up till now, and what I'm thinking is, maybe other people from other nationalities will say, what are you talking about, that you're off your rocker, we're like that. But there's a sense in Ireland of an oral tradition. And if you stop an Irish person and you get into it with them at a bus stop even, they'll start telling you a story straight away. They'll just start, and you know, we have expressions, spinning a yarn, and you know, he'd talk the leg off you and all of that. And sort of common through all of these things are like, and there's also a connection to the land, because anywhere, almost because of our small population, I suppose, once you step outside it, you don't have to go too far, even in the city, I guess, and you see fields and forests and, you know, hills away off and the thing, and so you've got that oral tradition of passing information. It wasn't really written down
Yeah.
in history, in our history. It was an oral tradition, and how people told stories as a way to pass on information. Plus, you had this wilderness. You go off and there's over that hill. We can't go over that hill because they're the wild men who live over there. Wait till you hear, sit down, and I'll tell you, and here we go. And it is that's what you're talking about. All those influences that you're talking about. That really just all comes through is the connection to the land, and an oral tradition connected to the land. That's what's coming across really, really strongly from. And then you've got all these. So out of your head, from that tradition comes an elf, a barbarian, a vampire, a clown, a detective. It just all comes pouring out of you. It's amazing. It's just really amazing. All these things that I don't know how you've got to find a way to keep doing this, because I just imagine that if you stop doing this for whatever reason, you'd go potty because all this is clearly going on in your head.
Yeah, it's very cathartic to write something. People who are going through stress and depression and therapy, they're quite often told, write things down.
Yeah.
Literally, when you write on a page, you crystallize it on something. It goes black and white, literally. And you go, well, that's not a huge problem. You realize you can't lift a car on your own. But you can take the car apart. You can lift individual pieces. And you deal with a problem one tiny bit at a time.
Yeah.
And for me, I get stuff out of my head. There's things I hate. Things I hate in comics and, in movies. I go, oh, no, again. And people sit and they look. Oh, I've got 5 minutes left on this. So
okay.
I'll be quick. People look at stuff these days and they just categorize it. That's what that is. And it's quite often not. It's something else. It's only has the trappings of a Western or trappings of a horror movie, but it's actually about something else. I don't look for any meaning other than that. It's just entertain me while popcorn is going down and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And my influences are always books and comics and movies that are generally about something else. One of my biggest influences is Black Sad.
Oh yes.
They are, if I can get the hands on those, they are just amazing. He's a detective, a private eye, and he's in a European city. They've been translated into English, but I think they were Spanish originally. And there were two friends who created it. Then one went to work for Disney, and one went into comics full time, kind of thing. But he's a detective. He's the body of a man with the head of a cat.
Yeah.
Almost like a panther kind of thing. And it's set in that weird time when people smoked all the time and wore Macintoshes, and they're femme fatales, and But after the first story, they get into political kind of things, cover-ups, and what's happening in Europe at the time, and people don't realize the huge upheavals that were in Europe back in like the 70s, 60s, But I reckon I want to go and have a look at Black Sad, because when I was thinking of like the style in my head, I always thought of that, He has this old-fashioned narrative that my gun is quicker than my thoughts kind of thing, But he's always getting beaten up, as far as I can remember, But he always got his own back in the end. He got revenge, and he got justice for the person who was killed,
Yeah.
And his confidential informant was a rat, an actual rat, And his boss, I think his police contact, as far as I can remember, was an Alsatian dog, And it sounds weird, but when you see it, you think of Batman and you think of Commissioner Gordon when you see them at a crime scene. That pops into your head,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
What I'll do is,
So I was just looking up Black Sad again.
Yeah.
Forgot all about that. How cool he is. He's got that kind of. Is it Italian or French? Yeah, Italian. Can't remember. But anyway, he's got that European coolness. So even though it's set in New York, it's really cool.
And there's a book plate, I think it started with the collected edition, and he's walking along the street, and he's so cool, smoking a cigarette, and and all these crazy things, signs and stuff. Let's say Broadway and all that. Could be Broadway, could be anywhere, but he's just the coolest character, and the fact that he can get beaten up, and
Yeah.
he makes mistakes,
Yeah.
um, and he falls in love very easy, because a lot of these detectives aren't that savvy when it comes to affairs of the heart. They fall for
Yeah.
the wrong girl all the time, and that's something that I like. Um, yeah.
That was something you reminded me of. Like, I mean, you talk about this character, and in City of Clowns, you used clowns as cops, and but it's the same way. This guy's using a cat, and he's kind of anthropomorphizing, if that's a
Oh,
word.
yes,
And in the same way, even Mouse, he's using the cat and mouse as a kind
yes,
of thing.
yeah,
And you're using clowns in the same kind of, not metaphor. It's not exactly a metaphor. It's symbol. It's a
yeah,
symbolism to tell a different story, to kind of to represent different things that you're driving at. Yeah, it's really smart. That's what comics can do, because again, all of your influences are coming out. You haven't got a big Hollywood budget on special effects and all of that stuff, but you got a typewriter or a piece of paper and a pencil and piece of paper, and that's it. Off you go. You're going to the races. So we're talking about influences. All of these stories are coming through. We've got an oral tradition in Ireland and connection to the land, which gives which feeds the imagination as well, and then you squeeze that into 21st century lens through comic books and films and everything. What kind of movies did you watch whenever you were a kid?
Well, my grandfather didn't like movies, but he loved
Oh,
reading. Yeah,
right.
he loved reading, and the deal with him was I could read a non-fiction book if I read, I'd have to read a fiction book if I read a non-fiction book. So I read lots of biographies. So when it came to look at movies, I would watch a biopic of someone like Patton or someone like that, or Napoleon or whoever. And I didn't realize that how they were changing the story to suit the movie, quite a lot of time. It wasn't the words and all, how these people
Yeah.
really were, how the world was, because you have to take it to an audience, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but the movies I grew up with were all black and white detective stories, The Tin Man, Maltese Falcon, you know, um, and tempered that with my mother who loved musicals. So I grew up having seen every single Hollywood musical, from Gold Diggers of '42 right up to Hello Dolly with my mother. Um, in school, you know, people would talk about what they watched on television, and it was see the match last night or question of sport, and I was going, I saw Cabaret. Yeah, it's definitely something wrong today. But I then met a woman who loves movies, my wife, and all of our kids love these things,
Yeah.
And we've been to live shows, you know. We absolutely adore going to the theatre. We go to musicals, there's since the COVID's finished, we've got tons of these things lined up this year and next year. Tickets we bought.
Yeah. Yeah.
We love seeing musicals because in a musical, your heart opens up and the truth comes out. As you sing, and that's the kind of thing I think when people don't always tell you how they feel or what they think. And they always like got an agenda. But when you watch a musical, the music starts. They start tap dancing. And they start singing, and the audience understands that this is an emotion put on display. Um, and that's what I grew up with. But I also grew up with westerns because my mother loved westerns, and again, I must have seen every single western ever made. You know, but my favorites were the '60s westerns where they were starting to get grittier. You
Mm.
know, and I grew up with like all the Sergio Leone movies, Clint Eastwood, Fistful of Dollars, Few Dollars More, Good, Bad, and the Ugly, what you call it. But when Sam Peckinpah made um, The Wild Bunch, I saw that, and I saw it, around the same time as I saw Night of the Living Dead. I was like 9 years old, and frightened the bejesus out of me. I saw Night of the Living Dead, and I went with my cousins to see it again the next week. But the little theatre we used to go to in Crumlin, um, they would change, but they hadn't got enough money to put posters outside, so the movie changed on moment's notice. And this movie started off, and I had told them how great the horror movie was. This thing started off in colour, and these guys riding into town, and then freeze frame, and then riding into, and I thought, what the hell's gone here? And they're all looking at me, this isn't the picture you're talking about. And it wasn't. And they loved The Wild Bunch. It was such a surprise. And what it's about, it isn't so obvious as people think, there's so much more going on there. And when I did the talking going the Western, in the back of my head, I thought, I'd love to go all out and do, The Wild Bunch. Tell that story of a time passing and people not keeping up with it and realizing it's all over for us, so we're going in a blaze of glory kind of thing. But once that's been done, it's unfair to do it again,
Yeah.
And you could do it in the comic. And there's a page in Talking Gun where the Talking Gun gets to talk and does his business. And I love that page, it's great. It's all building up to that point. But it's there's a whole lot of westerns after that that were very violent for the sake of being violent, and they missed the point, being in the Old West gave them like a carte blanche reason to have exploding blood squibs and things, and everything's in slow motion and stuff. But it meant nothing, It was an empty thing, and I went. For me, westerns went out of fashion then. For me, it's a pity. There's been a couple of good ones, but But influences are weird,
there's a kind of common thread in that you're usually talking about something else, and in westerns, they're usually talking about something else. They're on the face of it, it's like a revenge thing, but they might be talking about slavery. That can happen, and that comes through all of the books there. So the fantasy, detective, noir, and crime, and westerns, and they're the settings. So on the face of it, they're the settings. It could be modern day Dublin or the Old West. Or wherever it happens to be, but you're talking about something else, and on the face of it, it's it's this thing. And we're talking. There's a mystery going on in SSDD. There's this particular narrative going along, and that's fine. But there's other stuff that really you're talking about other things. So and that comes through all the influences you've been listing here. It's a similar thing that if it's a fantasy and you think, right, there's the hero and he meets the magician and they go off and they meet the elf on the way, and you could take it in as they just want to defeat the Dark Lord. You could take it on that level. And a lot of films are on that level. They're just on that level, and you're on a hiding to nothing. I was watching a film, I can't remember what it is. I got so bored I couldn't sustain anything. But within the first couple of minutes, like 10 or 15 minutes, they laid out everything that they wanted to do, the person, and then that's it. They just set about going there. So there's no tension, there's a couple of car chases and an explosion and a dinosaur or something. And that's it. You just take it, and there's an explosion or two, and we were out just with the kids there, and I have a soon to be 13-year-old, and so her and her wee pal, and they were goofing around and everything. And I was just trying to connect with them. Generally we were waiting for mum and dads to come and pick them up. And I was talking, and I was saying, so what are you guys into? You're into, everything's on their phone and all of this. And you were reminding me of things, of old black and white movies. I consider myself really, really lucky that when I was a kid, they reran the old Tarzan movies, the old Laurel and Hardy films, the Harold Lloyd movies. They ran all these movies, and Flash Gordon, King of the Rocket Men.
Oh yeah.
I loved it. And there was one called Undersea Kingdom, and it was amazing, just these things. And then the old 1930s and 40s serials and everything. So, and I just soaked them up, like those old black and white Tarzan movies with Johnny Weissmuller. And it's like this guy, and when the kids were away, I let them watch it on YouTube on the computer. And there's a part where Tarzan's son boy falls down. There's a rhinoceros or something comes along, tries to chase him and everything. And kids, they were wee at the time, and they're messing around and kind of thing. And they stopped and they looked because they could see the danger. There's, that they did in those days. They just got a kid and threw it in front of a rhinoceros and said, "Roll camera." Because the kids were just like, "What's going on?" And then it cut back, and it's that really simple language. There's a kid, this rhinoceros is chasing him down. He's calling for his dad. His dad's, leaping from tree to tree and swinging. And it's just that real simplicity, this black and white. There's music and everything. There's no talking. It's just this ratcheted up of tension, and the kid is in front of the rhinoceros. Are they going to make it on time? And there's not just simple. There's been a couple of times where a couple of panels I've been drawing, there's not very much in the panel. The characters, and they're standing either in the landscape and the street is, and there's not very much even in the way of dialogue. And it reminds, and guess what? We're doing black and white. So all that stuff just keeps coming through. It just keeps, And I was saying, we were standing around, we were talking to the kids about, I was just trying to make connections with them, and I was asking them about them and what kind of movies they like. And, it's always bad form, I guess, that people of our generation look down on the younger generation and their fancy gadgets and their stupid trousers, and they don't know nothing and all of this, and so on and so on. But, they were turned on kids, and they were, hip to things. But I guess they just consume things. Everything's the same. There's just an immediate satisfaction. They're just about to be teenagers, so you just react to it in that way. But we were talking about how High Noon. I was talking to him about High Noon. I was explaining to it, and there's just this one thing happening.
Yeah.
Right, but the guy, something's going to happen at high noon, and the clock's ticking, and you're watching this clock, and you've got to sit. And by God, by the time it comes high noon, by the end of the film, you're gripping this thing. Do you know what I realized as I was telling them, as I was speaking to them, they shut up what they were, blah, 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 back and forward to each other. They were hooked on every word. Not that I was being, great thespian or anything, but I described it in a way and said, "Would you hear this? You'll not believe this." And it's black and white, and there's not an explosion, and I think is there a couple of gunshots? Not very many,
no,
just one or two, and it's the greatest movie in the world. So there's a couple of things. One is, keep coming back to this oral tradition, this simplicity of message come through, but what you present isn't really what you're getting at. It's a way in, it's a way to slide in what you really want to talk about. And that's what I think about the stories you've written. That's what I think of the brilliance of them. That did you consciously do that, Ray? Do you really?
Yeah.
This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's really
talking gun. The big influence was the Wild Bunch. And that's about a defining moment in history for these people. New weapons are coming online, things are changing. Mexico has a leader one week, has another leader next week, and America doesn't want to lose connection out to it, and they're trying to hold on to something that's stripping away from them. And all that thing about losing the status quo, it's disappearing, you can't hold on to it. That defining moment, that
Yeah.
idea of it, that's what's got me into the talking gun.
Yeah.
Because when the Gatling gun came along, it changed everything.
Yeah.
One man could, well, they had technical problems with it, but one man could do a lot of damage with this thing.
Yeah.
If you look at the pages on Talking Gun, all the way along, you have a character, even John Two Wolves. You see him in pretty much the same pose in two different panels. But between one panel and the next time you see him in that pose, he's about to shoot a gun. Something has happened. There's a defining moment for him.
Yeah.
Before, he was quite happy to be a killer and pick off unarmed men, because the army told him to do that.
Yeah.
Then he meets a man who opens him up to vampirism. These aren't men, these are beasts. So he goes back into the same position he was in before and realizes, oh, things have changed. And I use the motif of the vampire's finger. I know you probably didn't even notice it, but when vampires first get shot, John Two Wolves thinks he can shoot him in the chest. The vampire goes,
Yes.
with his finger.
Yeah.
Later on, vampires break in from outside to a place and touch silver, and it burns their finger.
Yeah.
And later on again, there's a vampire who's caught in a black box because the sun is outside. He sticks his finger out and it gets burned. So it's these moments, things happen from one panel to the next, and the character has realized something. And I use that sort of motif very deliberately all the way through, And there's very little that's thrown in for fun. I mean, now and again I'll do something for fun, but it's all, I write a short story, I figure everything out, and then I do an outline. And once I've got the outline right, transfer it to a comic. And then I get back to the short story and say, right, what's happening with this person? Where's their moment that they change, that they find something else?
Yeah.
And, when the reason I write a story and want to tell someone, and when I finally get that in my head, I know what the story is really about. You get an idea, but an idea isn't a story.
Yeah.
One of my influences would be Jack Reacher novels. He's this giant of a guy who was trained by the army, grew up as an army brat, and they let him go. He's made redundant, and he decides to walk across America. He's always served on foreign bases. Now he wants to see America. The America that he saw in movies when he's on bases abroad, the music he heard, the jazz music and stuff, and the books that he read. He wants to go and see the places that they were set in, and the person who wrote the book, where they lived. So he happens to bump into a problem every single book and save somebody, put his life on the line. But he's this monstrous big guy, that you don't mess with. And people keep messing with him,
Yeah.
But that's the shtick of the book, And I love that. That's a big influence because the guy who wrote them, Lee Child, I forget his real name, but he was asked about ideas. And I get to say, where'd you get your ideas from? All the bloody time. People keep saying, clowns, where'd you get it from? Okay, so he was asked about ideas. And he said, look, ideas aren't important. You have 50 ideas before breakfast if you want. What do you do with that idea? And if you write a book, even a comic book, you can be very simple about it.
Yeah.
You get a flashbang wallop and there's the hero, something happens, he goes off on his journey, he gets beaten up by an enemy or gets his heart broken by a friend, he learns a lesson, brings it all back to where he was to start, saves the person he was supposed to save. The end.
Yeah.
Or you can grab people's attention and get them thinking, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah.
Do a Quentin Tarantino thing on it, where people are focused on the moment,
Yeah.
where they're all in scene with the actors,
Yeah.
Afterwards you think, did I really sit and watch that? Well, then you watch it a second time anyway,
Yeah.
His movies are very, very watchable. Doesn't matter about the guy himself. I don't care what people are like, but that's me. That's what I do. I take these 50 ideas a circle around, and the main thing I want to say, and I deliberately litter stuff all over the book, you
Yeah.
know. And it's not until you get to the end and you go back, maybe read it again, you go, I see what he was doing here, you know. And it's nice to surprise people.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things I find in comics is tension. It's hard to frighten people in a comic.
Yeah.
You can disgust them. You can show them something totally awful and go, yeah, it's your fault. You bought the book, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's hard to get that Hitchcock tension going. I've seen other people do it in things, and they have to do it a certain way, you know. And our stories are different. They're very layered. There's several things happening.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do a lot of that liberty. Sometimes funny things happen that I didn't recognize, you know. And by the time I got the pages back from you and seeing your point of view on the script, I go,
Yeah.
oh yeah, maybe I was thinking that, maybe I wasn't. But Jim has found something here I didn't see, you know. And actually, I made the list today of influences, and the people who influenced me, top of the list is Jim Lavery on the list here.
Really?
Yeah. I write a script, I think it's perfect. Ain't nobody gonna mess with this. The Godfather has spoken, you know. Take my script and make a book on it, right? Then I give it to Jim. Jim goes, got my magic marker, wherever it is here. I don't Copic marker, and you go, and you give me back a page, and I go, son of a bitch, you know. I didn't see that coming. I didn't understand why that was important, especially with the female characters in Witch. You know, Nessie and Helga aren't the way I wrote them. You know, yeah, and they are better. You know, yeah.
It's so crazy because I really believe whatever I get in the scripting, I'm in my brain. My number one kind of priority is to get at what I think you want. I mean, to me, it's really clear. Right, Ray has said when I was reading your description of Two Rules and everything, it's clear in my brain. It's really clear. So in my opinion, I'm thinking this guy's the greatest collaborator in the world. I don't have to do anything. He's made it really clear. I know who these guys is. Bing, bang, bong. Here we go. I'm off. I don't need to know. Now I have to say with the vampire, I did. That's just my. I suppose you could tell my kink, I guess. That I was thinking of Marilyn or Caroline Monroe for that character. So that's a wee bit of a cheat. That was just a wee bit of fancy on my behalf. But everything else is like I go, I don't need to make this up. They're all there. There's something about we're just doing. I don't want to spoiler alert or anything. This page, actually, this is a really good opportunity. You'd written this statue of a minotaur that appears in the latest issue of Witch that we were doing. And again, it was really, really clear. The design of Minotaur. Okay, it's a Minotaur. We all know what that is. And you described him dragging this axe along the ground, you know. And I thought, and I drew it, and it was okay. It was perfectly fine. Yeah, okay, it's a Minotaur. And I was looking at bulls. I said, okay, how's that connected? That bull head connected to the thing. And for whatever reason, I don't know. Like I'll do this sometimes. I drew a skull hanging from one.
Yeah.
And a dead bird from the other. Now, definitely that stuff, that's like a brain fart for me. That definitely happens. But I would say 98% of the time it's you. It's all in the script. That's what I feel anyway. That's what I feel. Yeah, definitely it comes through. So
I can tell you, Nessie isn't the way I wrote her at all.
Really?
She starts off the first few pages, yeah, sort of like her. But as it goes on, when she's hiding the things in her cloak and she's looking at this big padlock, you know, you have this mischievous thing to her. I don't know how you do it. This is it. This is why I say, you draw something and you put some little thing in there that I go, oh yeah, that's different. She has this mischievous look, you know. And she goes, oh yeah. And that's something about her. I don't know how you do it, but she's definitely not the person that I wrote in the book, the script originally. And she's better for it though. That's the thing, you know. She's much better.
Yeah, I think that's kind of why we're two pugs. We're kind of the outcome is better than the individual.
Yeah, some of the part.
Um,
Yeah.
I think that's maybe it. I think that's what I'm discovering anyway. Because with again, it's hard to explain. So I'm reading the script and her characters coming through. So those are the expressions of mischievous, and I think described her almost boyish or something. You'd suggested she's kind of boyish haircut and everything, and that came through. She was young, so she's not developed
Yeah. Yeah.
in the chest, or she's very. There's a hint, which is completely different from Helga. She's like
Yeah.
a woman, like she
Yes,
is a woman.
and they complement each other. It's great.
Yeah,
And at
and which
the end of the book,
which
they're
makes me think that
friends. You notice that?
yeah,
Is
and
that comes true now. They are friends now.
they're friends now.
It's
And
amazing.
this odd family you've created, and she's mothering. She's being a mother. She's looking out for her, and she's got this weird husband on the side.
Yeah,
It's a weird family, like
it
a
is.
weird
Yeah.
kind
It's
of
a very
thing.
dynamic. Yeah, yeah.
But it comes through in the script. It's right there in the script. I go, okay, all right, all right. See, this is where we're going here. And then it's just their dialogue, and you get to know them over. We're on issue 4 now. And I mean, I'd sent the pages through so we're over halfway point of this issue, and we're coming to the end. And I can't indulge that thought too much because I'm feeling a real pang of sadness.
Feels
I'm
like
going,
regret. Yeah, like regret. Yeah, it's over.
it's coming to an end.
Yeah.
I thought, damn, I just feel like I'm getting started with these characters and we're coming to an end.
Yeah, we have to get invested in our stories. Every single story, we have to approach it. That
Yeah.
this is the thing we're concentrating on. We have to live these characters because if we don't believe in it, it's going to show in comic when it's finished. It must be difficult for people who are on a long running comic. And if you listen to podcasts, quite a lot of people have said they did 5 years on a superhero comic or 5 years on a crime comic, and it burned them out. They stopped believing what we were doing, and it was just an assembly line. Now, everything is assembly line.
Yeah.
But when we're doing things like this, we're trying to get people to love these characters, especially for you. You spend so much time on these,
Yeah.
If your love for these characters isn't there, it shows on a page,
Yeah.
And that's why when I open a page, pick any one of our books you've done, open any page at all, and you'll see Jim Lavery's love for what he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see that he didn't sleepwalk through this page, Whether you were tired, whether you were hungry, that
Yeah.
got to be doing this. This is the emotion I want to show, and you draw it that way.
Yeah.
I did that with words, but then I got a month to do a panel. If I'm
Yeah.
not happy with a line and something, I can think about it for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
You have to hit the ground running every day and go right. Yeah. So that's quite a lot of my influences, and from my upbringing, what I saw in movies, what I read in books, and everything I ever read focused me in a way to say, this is how you tell a story. It wasn't until I did evening courses in creative writing, and I did a course for writing for kids with Roche McCann. I'd recommend that course to anybody because he takes your story every single week, gives you, while he's correcting that, telling you where you went wrong, and he's giving you a new task for the following week. And before you realize it, the tasks are doubling up. You're doing an awful lot of work. You're going home at night and you're working. You're in your job, and over your tea break, you're writing down notes and stuff and doing, yeah, I gotta do it better. Oh, she's expecting something from me.
Yeah.
That was a very exciting time. Now, I finished the course, I learned an awful lot. My writing changed because of it. And I noticed that when I'm doing something now, I go, I'm going to impress Jim with this. If I can impress Jim, Jim will impress the page will impress the reader.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way it is. When I write something, I go, that's just mediocre.
Yeah.
Jim's going to look at that and go, 2 flies on the wall. 2 flies on the wall, there you go. And all I get is 2 flies on the wall. If I say there's 2 mysterious insects on the wall, Jim goes, oh, hey, 2 mysterious insects. And we're, as you say, we're off to the races with something different. You
Yes.
have to generate the interest in the next person on the assembly line, because this is all an assembly line.
Yeah.
And if I'm bored doing something, I understand that people, they're going to be bored too, But I get so excited about stuff. I can't stop thinking about whatever story we're doing now.
Yeah.
We're into 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 12 or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about stories next year,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm going, I've got to finish off what we're doing. I've got other stuff I've got to do as well. And
But that's a really good, and that's come up a couple of times, I think. And it's like, if you can't sit
yeah,
for 8 hours a day, 8 hours a day on your own with me in my me and a drawing board, or you and a typewriter or a computer or whatever, to the exclusion of everything else, and find like your life is going to be really difficult if you can't love that, if you can't love it, love the isolation, love the blank page, which I'm terrified of. Blank pages terrify me, really do. I can't, like, I need the script, and I think, oh, thank God Ray's written it. That's not my responsibility to write this. Right, Ray, where are we going? And then we'll get the script. But you've got to love it. You've got to love it enough to say, for 8 hours a day, I'm going to sit here. And this is the other thing. A lot of the artists get a lot of reputation for being flaky or unreliable, and I understand why, because it takes a lot, and there's a lot of distraction and a lot of other responsibilities, and so on and so on. And but the worst thing, the absolute worst thing, is to wait for your mood. Like, you've got to be in the mood to draw. Nope, nope.
yeah,
You've got to approach it like a job. You've got to work. Get your arse on the chair or wherever it is you're doing, and work. No, it doesn't wait, airy fairy, waiting for the butterflies to come down and land on your nose and whisper in your ear, and so on and so on. Nope, you've got to do a task, and that's the way it is. And so I guess, I mean, you were your influences, right? Do you keep notes and everything? Because I imagine, like,
God,
somebody
yeah,
will tell you something on a job, like there's uh, I don't know, there's something happens in the body that's, say, when somebody dies in a particular way, always, this bone gets yanked out of place or something like that, and you'll just go boink, I'll log that, that'll go in there somewhere, and it'll come out in a story point somewhere else. Do you do things like that, like
yeah,
keep
yeah. I keep notes
notes?
everywhere. I have notes on my phone. I have notes on post-its. I've stuff on my computer here. I've got an Microsoft Word file in work. I throw ideas on, and if I'm doing something, and the lady I work with, Di, she'll say something about. She'll be on the phone talking about a case or something, or she'll be talking to someone, giving them advice. This case is going to court. Remember to do that first, and then I go, oh. I type something popped into my head. I'll type that in. But she's an endless source of inspiration for me. And I know she doesn't understand it. You know,
Yeah.
and she doesn't. She looks at herself and she goes, "I'm just a person. I'm a normal person. Like, where does this come from, Ray?" I look at her and it's like someone's fired a starting pistol. And go, let's go. That's why
Yeah.
my brain just races off. But what you were saying there a second ago about you got to be prepared to sit in a chair. I have a message I got about something we said a while ago. Give me a second. Um, lads, you're very funny, the pair of you. Okay, yeah, we are sometimes. One
Yeah.
thing I have has a problem with one thing. Um, you're putting people off getting into this business. It's not all doom and gloom and loneliness. Yeah, yeah, I know what he's saying. It is. Our makeup here is I write on a computer on my own, you draw on your own. But there are a lot of people who are part of writing groups, or collaborate with, like they see
Yes.
their artists face to face every other day or every other weekend or whatever, and they touch base like that. We tend to do it over the computer, only
Yeah.
because of we're at that age in our lives where we have families and we live different parts of the country. But I get what he's saying. It's not doom and gloom. It isn't.
Yeah.
It can be very what you call it, it's a very supportive atmosphere when you're collaborating with people sometimes. It can be maddening, especially if you're meeting up in a pub once a week and there's a
Yeah,
drink involved, and and you trash things out. But yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. You can join groups, you can make your
yes,
own comics with other people. So
yeah,
it's like the BBC where if they mention cornflakes, they have to say there are other cereals out there. So just
yeah.
because
I shouldn't. Yeah, yeah.
not
I
the
should.
only way.
I didn't realize that. I didn't really realize. But yes, it's wonderful. It's really. I would never have met you. There's so many other things. There's things I get to do, talks and different things. I go into schools. I do Zoom classes. And, I love working with kids. There's, you just don't know where you are. I do Zoom classes, and they'll say things. They'll just throw you curveballs. It is wonderful. It's wonderful. And if I've given anybody the impression that it isn't, I'm sorry about that. And also, you get the drawl there, which is an amazing too. But I do think you kind of um, you've got to be truthful as well. There's a heart. It's hard work. It's tough. And I don't know if I was 16 or 17 would I make just the same decisions that I would make now. But it's wonderful. I shouldn't downplay it. It
I
is
think
amazing. I'm
in
very
their
lucky.
case, when you're younger and you have your buddies around and you
Mm,
don't have a job or a job you have to spend like so many hours with and have a family as well, you know,
yeah,
um, doing a couple of hours a week on your comic and your comic might take, say it's a 8-page comic and takes you a year to make it. That's
mm,
fine. We don't have a year. You
yeah,
have a life, I have a life. You have
yeah,
family, I have family. We full-time jobs basically.
yeah,
You spend a lot of time on your own doing
yeah,
this. You know, that's our situation now. But if we were
yeah,
young, free, and single in our early 20s, and different kettle of fish, you wouldn't be
different.
spending this time on it.
Yeah,
It's only because of where we are now, our situation is it's a happy accident we met each other like this.
yeah, uh-huh.
But it's a situation. But again, I'm out there thinks it's doom and gloom and hide the razor blades. It's not like that at all. It's
So,
great, great fun, and
oh
you
yeah,
can do
yeah,
it
yeah.
with six
Well,
people or 12 people. There's no limit to people you can get involved in a comic.
yeah.
Just we happen
We'll
to.
have to have a happy episode next week. We'll have to have a really, really happy episode. Just bump it up a bit.
I get people send me messages, and we've only put up like four of them, I think it was, and the first one it was ha 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 and all this, because I was very excited talking too fast, and I was this and that and this and that and this and that, and I was all over the place.
Yeah,
But by the time we did the one on the cons, I started
yeah,
getting people saying, "Yeah, I've done that. Yeah, that's happened to me." You
yeah,
know, um, we're honest about what we say. And
yeah, yeah.
we don't gild the lily. It is what.
No, no.
And people are responding now and are saying, "Yeah, yeah, you're quite right. And, I've done that con and that happened. This happened."
Yeah,
So there's commonalities in everything.
yeah,
We do it this way, and we give people advice. Probably,
yeah,
um, they can do it the exact opposite and be a big success.
yeah,
Advice is only good because it's what you experience and you pass it on to someone else.
yeah,
But someone else can do one comic, spend a couple of years on it, take that comic, not sell it at a convention, and get a job as a colorist out of that. I know a guy
yeah,
like that. But
yeah,
he was able to spend 2 years going to every convention, haunting someone, working as an intern, and then getting a job out of it. And because
yeah,
he was associate that person, his name got mentioned, he moved on to the next one, next one, next one. But colorists and letterers, they can do quite well, in
yeah.
comics. They can work
Okay.
for anybody, anywhere in the world. And again, it's not doom and gloom. Like the one lad,
No, no.
Rob Jones, and he packed
Oh
in
yeah,
a job
yeah,
recently, and he's doing this full time. But he's got
yeah.
reputation, and he's very flexible.
I worked with Rob. Rob, one of the really, really first jobs I ever did, and Rob was just starting, and we did it together. Crikey, I can't even remember what it was, and yeah, and I saw him go, and and that's the other thing we can talk about consistency.
Yeah,
You could be a terrific, terrific artist. Great, okay. Are you consistent? Can you put stuff out on time? One of the first pieces of advice I ever got was if you say you're going to do X, do it. especially even if you're doing it for no money, if you're doing it for like a fanzine or something. But if you've said that you're going to do it, you better do it, because you'll get burned. People will, that if you don't, that will spread like wildfire. It'll spread. That guy's not consistent. And Rob is consistent. He's very good, and he just chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. You know, it's really, really good to see him come in, or coming along. And yeah, as you say, he's quit. I think he's quit his job, but he's doing it full time.
Yeah, brilliant.
Fair play to him. Good for him.
Again, he's sought after now. You know,
Yeah.
the point I'm making is you don't have to be a publisher. You know, there are jobs doing this that you can do full time. Okay, lettering is slightly different to coloring. You know, there's a different pay scale. You know, and you know, because of what it is. I letter my own stuff simply because the art is different than the script when it comes back. That's the way it is. I mean, I get a chance to redo the lettering then, you know. But if I could afford to pay someone, you know, we do everything on shoestring, unfortunately. And if I could look at there when it comes back, and I could redo the lettering and send someone else. But it's like color. It's an extra expense. I haven't made it into the right level of sales to go full color yet. We have plans, but you know. But again, there's jobs you could do. This editing jobs can be very lucrative. You know, if you know what you're doing, you get recommended. And people who are starting off, piece of advice I've given them was, pay an editor, you know, for the first 1 or 2 books, because they'll teach you an awful lot. Unless you're an idiot with a big ego who's, he doesn't understand my vision, you know. And again, you know, I had an editor the first few books, Colin, and he was brilliant. He taught me loads of stuff. One of his big things was, why is your character doing this? Well, because. Yeah, but you don't say that. You know, your reader's not going to know because. So, and if you notice, our scripts have gotten leaner and leaner, you know. Because you do so much of the storytelling visually now. You know what Ray wants. You know, I mean, I could describe everything in the drafts, huge drafts. And what's the point? That just slow you down. You don't need it. If I was working with somebody new,
no. I just all I need
you'd have to explain things to people. You know, because they have different life experiences. You know, you've drawn hundreds of pages for me now at this point. You know. So if I say it's this, you go, yeah, but I could do it this way. And what you send me back, we've said it before, most of the time, not a lot of the time, it's an improvement of what I said, you know. And because I see it like with a camera, whereas you're the nuts and bolts guy, you've got to put all those things in the scene. And, you know, that doesn't work. Ray's brain was doing something different there. He needs it this way instead. And that works, you know. I mean, it's just such a pleasure, you know. And we're not fighting. We don't fight each other over anything, you know. The odd time something doesn't work, and half the time that I put something ambiguous in the script, or I've said 2 things that conflict, you know. And the additions you put in, you know, makes the relationships in most of the cases, you know. And I'm very bad. You know?
No, it's
relationships. You know,
and it's that weird chemistry, you know. You or cooking, maybe that's a better analogy, that you know, you add a couple ingredients, you get, you know, flour and eggs, and you get this, and you get a cake and everything. So I'm sort of, to kind of bring the discussion about influences to a close. Everything, really, literally everything, your job, movies you watch, books you read, conversations you have, you're just storing it all.
Pretty much.
There's that, plus I guess we've got to say, it's culturally, people will have their own, you know, maybe Spanish and French people will say these guys are off their rocker. We do that in France and Spain as well, you know. But I'm just going to say that we have this tradition in our country, you know, of the way it's faster to speak, and we don't have a tradition. We have an astonishingly literary tradition. Of course we do. But culturally speaking, we have a very strong oral tradition. And you've gathered up, so you're like one of those, like a bird feather in their nest, it might be string and wool and, twigs and, whatever and you've just got this thing, and then you've just got to get it out. You've just got to, and then it just all comes out. That's the thing. But the main, I guess, would be those stories that kind of come with me in this little, whatever it's a movie you're watching or a book you're reading, you've got this little narrative. That's your biggest influences, really, the stories that you have in your head. Kind of a bit odd.
Like I said, a magpie.
And then some people book it. I remember having this. I wonder if this has happened to you in work. I was having a chat at the place I used to work one day, and I was getting really angry because the guy I worked with was suggesting that I was lying or not telling the truth. And I was really getting angry about it. And I was like, well, why do you think that? You're full of... What I realized I was doing is I would notice, really, just like you're saying, really peculiar things that logged them. And it wasn't my fault that I would just tell stories. Somebody would tell me something, and I said, oh, that reminds me of this time. And for some reason, he was saying, you're full every time the story you come out with. I'll think of an example, like, there was a thing where up in Belfast, there was some really funny thing I noticed, where there'd be like a disturbance, like a riot or something like this, and then the police would come in, they'd clear it, or it would cool down everything. And once everything was cleared, like there'd be armored cars and bottles and bricks and dogs running around and people and police chasing them, petrol bombs, and that thing would go on. And it was terrifying, and everybody was worked up and all of this. And then we'd calm down and, order would be restored and everything. Hand to God, I swear to you, if you walk back out onto that road half an hour after it all being cleared away, there'd be a shoe sitting on the road. Right. There'd be a shoe, right? And we would just go, and it's just something I picked up on, and I go, somebody, and nobody ever said, what happened yesterday? You'll never, I was in the middle of it all, we're throwing a thing, I lost my shoe. Nobody ever admitted to it. Right? And there was another thing happening where we noticed that there'd be a news report from that incident, or later on, the reporter would be standing talking about that, and we would do. It was almost like a big drinking game to have, because as the reporter was standing there reporting, somebody behind on a mountain bike would go past on a mountain bike. Right. So we would just like, if the news report were on, we'd wait, and then somebody would go, yay! They'd go and thing. So we just wonder, and then we used to think, is that the guy looking for a shoe? We'd talk about that. But this guy in work we were talking about that. And this guy, it was almost like he didn't believe me or something. But it's just that I know, like you're saying, you notice things like that. You notice, like, if it comes up on SSDD that there's a news report and a camera, you can guarantee there'll be a shoe and a guy on a mountain bike behind, So it's one of those magpies. I think you said magpies. It's a perfect way to end that. Listen, if you have made it to the end, we'll put it at the beginning and the end. Please do leave a comment, good, bad, or indifferent. A like and subscribe really, really help us. Ray and I are just finding our way, and we're not 100% sure what we're doing, but we'll get there with your help if you help us, and we really, really appreciate it. I'm really enjoying it, just the chance to talk and talk about things that we are doing, have been doing, and maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, are going to be doing as we go along in the future. So yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. Not sure what episode this is, 4 or 5 or something, but anyway, leave your comments.
There's going to be a 2-part Talking Gun.
Yes. Yeah.
And everyone should have a look at that if you haven't seen it, because we talk about a lot of stuff about the meaning of what we're doing, and so things makes more sense.
Yeah.
As I say, this has been all about influences. Like and subscribe if you can. I've been Ray Roche. He's been Jim Lavery. He's in the cellar somewhere. Until next time, see you, Jim. It's always a pleasure. Good luck, folks.
Thank you, Ray. I'll see you next week. Thanks for
Fellas.
everybody. See you next time. That was